G'day, my name's Alan Gamble. Welcome to another episode of Aussie Box Office Charts. We have a big weekend to talk about, lots to talk about. We have a new Christopher Nolan, The Odyssey, lighting up the charts. Let's dive into the top 10. So, first of all, starting it with the top 10, yes, The Odyssey lands at number 1 with a whopping $13.4 million, $13.46 million. That is a phenomenal opening for 2026. That is the biggest opening of 2026 at the Australian box office. I expected it to open pretty well. I didn't expect that. And to rattle off a few other numbers, we're going to dive right into Christopher Nolan after the top 10, but that is the biggest opening of 2026, the second biggest opening for Christopher Nolan at the Aussie box office ever, and the 8th biggest July opening of all time in Australia. We're going to crunch all those numbers after the top 10, but phenomenal opening for Christopher Nolan there. At number 2, we have Moana, the live action, dropping 51% with another $2.9 million in its second week for a current total of $12.4 million. That's right, second week, and it's under The Odyssey. At number 3, we have Toy Story 5 with another $2.8 million. Its fifth week in release, dropping 44% for a current total of $42.3 million. Doing very, very well over there in Toy Story. And one thing you'll notice with Moana, Toy Story 5, and number 4, Minions and Monsters, all having pretty big drops. That is the return to school drop. So school's back, so all those family movies take a big dip. The Minions and Monsters brings in $2.1 million in its fourth week of release, dropping 42% for a current total of $21.1 million. And moving up to number 5 in its second week of release is The Invite. Great movie, you should definitely check it out if you like a good dramedy. Dropping just 29% in its second week for a current total of $1.4 million, bringing in another $460,000 this weekend. Moving on to 6 through 10, dropping down to number 6 is Obsession with another $400,000. Its 10th week in release, dropping 42% for a current total of $23.8 million. Evil Dead Burn dropping pretty heavy, as horrors often do, with another $300,000, dropping 60% in its second week of release for a current total of $1.3 million. Jackass Best and Last at number 8 with another $250,000 in its third week of release, dropping 59% for a current total of $2.7 million. Supergirl drops down to number 9 with another $177,000, dropping another 66% in its fourth week of release. Heavy drops every week for Supergirl for a current total of $5.8 million. And rounding out the top 10 is Duster with $120,000 in its opening week. That is a Punjabi language historical drama out of India. So, first we have to update our top 5 openings of 2026 with The Odyssey landing at number 1 with its $13.46 million. That drops The Devil Wears Prada 2 down to number 2 with its $11 million opening. Toy Story 5 goes down to number 3 with its $9.7 million opening. Super Mario Galaxy Movie moves down to number 4 with its $8.4 million opening. And Michael rounds out the top 5 opening with its $7.9 million opening. Dropping out of the top 5 is Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu with its $6.4 million opening. Sad for that, but it wasn't going to compete. The other thing I want us to take a look at is, this is new. I haven't done one of these before because I've only got the numbers together recently and collated them from like 5 different sources: Variety, Box Office Mojo, The Numbers, Movie Marshal, like so many sources put together to come up with these numbers. These are the top 5 July openings of all time at the Australian box office. And The Odyssey enters the chart there at number 8, which knocks out Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix from 2007 that had a $12.8 million opening. At number 10, we have Twilight the Eclipse Part 3 with its $13 million opening. The Simpsons movie back in 2007 with a $13.2 million opening. At number 7 was Harry Potter the Half-Blood Prince in 2009 with a $14.3 million opening. And at number 6, another Christopher Nolan movie, The Dark Knight Rises, that opened to $15.3 million in July of 2012. At number 5, Thor Love and Thunder. People didn't love the movie, but they showed up on opening weekend to the tune of $15.7 million in 2022. Deadpool and Wolverine in 2024 opened to $17.6 million. Massive opening for that. Couldn't compare with the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Harry Potter, that opened to $18.2 million. Barbie takes number 2 in 2023 with its $19.5 million opening. And then the top opening movie in July at the Australian box office is 2019's The Lion King, the live action, and I do that in quotes because it's all CGI, but it opened to $20.5 million back in 2019. So Christopher Nolan opening weekends, we'll start off with a timeline and then quickly switch it around to high to low, but this is how his timeline looks. And you can see there, early days, Prestige, Insomnia, Memento, they opened pretty decent, but not blockbuster. Batman Begins in 2005 really put him on the map, and so did The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, obviously. After that, all of his movies, bar Tenet in 2020, which was 2020 to be fair, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, they've all opened around that $6 to $7 million range. Oppenheimer in 2023, with the entire Barbenheimer thing behind it, opened to $9.4 million, and then the Odyssey has opened to $13.4, which, if you crunch those numbers correctly, makes the Odyssey Christopher Nolan's second highest opening of all time at the Australian box office, only behind The Dark Knight Rises from 2012. These numbers aren't adjusted for inflation, but still, that's a really, really good effort. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. At number 3, The Dark Knight. At number 4, Oppenheimer, Inception, Dunkirk, Interstellar. Then we got a bit of a drop to Batman Begins, Tenet, and Insomnia, Prestige, and Memento. If we do adjust for inflation, the Odyssey doesn't drop down that far. It drops down to 3rd, which is still really, really impressive. The only two that remain above it were The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight from 2008. Everything else doesn't shimmy around too much. There's a few swaps here and there, but Insomnia, Prestige, and the Memento, their earlier movies, even adjusted for inflation, they don't go up that high. The last one we want to look at with Christopher Nolan, and we're doing this early, is his total gross for his movies at the Australian box office. Unadjusted for inflation though, but The Odyssey has already passed the total domestic gross of The Prestige, Insomnia, and Memento in its opening weekend. By the end of the week, I expect it's probably going to have passed Batman Begins and Tenet, because IMAX sessions everywhere are sold out. I reckon by next weekend, it's easily going to surpass Interstellar and Dunkirk, and then we just got to see how high it can go. Because it opened higher than Oppenheimer, I expect that it's going to get up to that level. Can it steal the top spot? We'll have to wait and see. We'll keep an eye on this chart as we move into the coming weeks. Moving on to upcoming releases. Wide release in 23rd of July. We don't have too much because not a lot wants to go head to head with Christopher Nolan. But what we do have, if The Odyssey is not your jam or you've already seen it once or twice already, we have Sia, Nostalgic for the Present, because nothing wants to go head to head with The Odyssey, so we have a music concert doco movie for Sia fans. We also have Detective Conan, Fallen Angel of the Highway, so the latest anime movie from this ongoing series. In limited release, so check your local and smaller indie cinemas, we have Penny Lane is Dead, a Aussie horror directed by Mia Kate Russell, starring Sophia Wright Mendelsohn, Tali Faraday, and Alexandra Jensen. We also have Wizard of the Kremlin, a French-language drama directed by Olivier Assayas, and starring Paul Dano and Jude Law. And we also have Colours of Time, a French comedy drama starring Suzanne Linden. Jumping across to streaming, where we do have a few things for you to watch, we have The Dink, a new comedy movie from director Josh Greenbaum, starring Jake Johnson, Mary Steenburgen, and Ed Harris. It releases on Apple TV Plus on July 23rd. We also have 72 Hours, another comedy. This one on Netflix on July 24th. It's directed by Tim Story, starring Kevin Hart, oh dear, Marcelo Hernandez, and Tiana Taylor. Outside of movies, we have Stuart Fails to Save the Universe, the latest Big Bang Theory spin-off releasing on HBO Max on July 24th, and it's starring Kevin Sussman, Lauren Lapkus, and Brian Posehn. We also have Pompeii Out of Time with Tom Hiddleston, a new documentary miniseries hosted by Tom Hiddleston, obviously, and it can be found on Disney Plus on July 23rd. In returning series, we have Star Trek Strange New Worlds returns for its 4th season, but I have to admit I stopped watching during season 3 and never caught up. But for those that caught up, it returns for season 4 on July 23rd on, obviously, Paramount Plus. The Walking Dead Dead City also returns for its 3rd season on AMC Plus on July 27th. So, 5 movies for this week's challenge theme of challenge, so let's dive in. First up was a 2026 catch-up movie of Mike and Nick and Alice, directed by Ben David Grabinski and starring James Marsden, Vince Vaughn, and Isa Gonzalez, telling the story of one crazy night of events, including time travel for some small-time gangsters. This one was a pretty fun crime adventure, some light sci-fi, and some pretty good comedy that landed for me at least. Not everything works, or all the comedy lands, but enough did that I had a good time with it. Next up was another 2026 release, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, starring Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, and basically every other actor ever. Christopher Nolan's take on the classic Homer poem of The Odyssey and a massive, sweeping historical epic. I've got to say, this was rock solid great movie from a bygone era of filmmaking. It felt like a historical epic in all the ways that matter, and the production values and commitment to shooting on location with as much real work as possible, keeping CGI to a noticeable minimum, was phenomenal. There is 100% lots of CGI, I'm sure, but it felt real because of how much they did practically. Great 2026 release. Next was not so great. It was Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li from 2009, directed by Andrei Batawiak and starring Kristen Kirk, Chris Klein, and Neil McDonough, telling an origin story of Chun-Li, the character from Street Fighter. And there's no way to sugarcoat this. This movie was really bad. Really, really bad. While the actors did what they could, the material they were given to work with was just not great. The story was jumping around all over the place, certain characters playing tropes in as roles as carbon copy as a Wikipedia page of character trope. Even the action sequences were terrible, and that's the one thing that can try to carry a movie like this. Not great. Next up was a 2013 TV movie, The Challenger, or The Challenger Disaster for US audiences, directed by James Hawes and starring William Hurt and Bruce Greenwood, telling a documentary drama about the investigation into the Challenger disaster in 1986. This was a great little movie. Well above what I was expecting from a TV movie, but it was really, really good. It flowed really well, and it was always great to see William Hurt, and the story itself was really interesting, as it was a look at what went on in the investigation after that fateful disaster. Finally, was a rewatch of 2006 DOA Dead or Alive, directed by Corey Yuen and starring Devon Aoki, Jamie Presley, Holly Valance, and Sarah Carter. A live-action movie adaptation of the DOA Dead or Alive fighting video game series. While this one can never be called a good movie by any stretch, compared to the Street Fighter movie that I just watched, it felt like a masterpiece. Sure, it's overtly sexual in camera shots, but if we're being honest, that's very akin to the games themselves. But it should have had Zack in his metallic Teletubby outfit to be a better movie, or way more Genfu, who should have carried the movie. I know Genfu's not as sexy, but Genfu should have carried the movie. But it's a movie that is bad, but it's also hilarious because it's aware that it's really, really stupid. It knows it's a dumb movie, and it leans into that, where some movies like Street Fighter try to play it cool, and it just doesn't work. This week's movie challenge is debuts. So basically, pick an actor, a writer, or a director that I enjoy and find their debut works. So the movie that they started in. We've had a few that people have kicked it off with Dada and Pillion. We've got Backrooms, 12 Years a Slave, Booksmart, 8th Grade, El Mariachi, Clerks. We've got lots to choose from. Let's have a look at my shortlist. My shortlist consists of King of Fighters, 12 Years a Slave, Slumdog Millionaire, Revenge, Theatre Camp. We've got a few directorial debuts in there, Dungeons and Dragons, Zero Effect, Bring It On, Perfect Blue. So yeah, we've got lots to choose from. We'll see how we go. But that is it for me this week. Tune in next week where we are going to crunch probably more Odyssey numbers. We might take a look at a few other things that are ongoing and still in the box office. But nothing wants to compete with the Odyssey next week. So it's going to be a fairly quiet week. I'm expecting the Odyssey to have a pretty good second week as well because nothing wants to compete with it. I might try and catch a 70mm version, but otherwise, we'll see how we go. I've got an apartment inspection next week, so I'm going to be cleaning all weekend. Yay me, have fun. Anyway, tune in next week. We're going to be looking at some stuff. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Until then, watch more movies. Bye.